The Iritian fleet, known throughout the galaxy for their unmatched intellect and technological prowess, was on the cusp of an important mission. For centuries, they had surveyed countless species, cataloging them, studying their strengths and weaknesses, and ensuring their own place at the top of the galactic hierarchy. They believed they understood the cosmos and every civilization within it. But today, as they approached the outer rim of human space, something felt different. Captain Myler stood at the helm of the flagship, Iritian Sovereign, his sharp eyes narrowing as he gazed at the sensors. His mind was a fortress of logic, free from the whims of emotion. Yet an unfamiliar sensation crept into his thoughts. It was the feeling of something elusive, like a thread of unease tangled in the fabric of his calculations. The humans had been a curiosity, a primitive species that had expanded rapidly across their solar system and beyond. On the surface, their technology was crude, their warships unsophisticated. They were the type of species that Iritians might have ignored, if not for their explosive growth and unsettling resilience. Myler's fleet had arrived near the coordinates of a human warship, Indomitable. Its energy signature was nothing extraordinary, no more than a blip in the vast emptiness of space. It should have been a simple scan, a brief analysis of another insignificant vessel. But as Myler stared at the data, he could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. The signature of the Indomitable was unsettlingly too ordinary, almost like it was intentionally masking something far more dangerous. "Captain, the Indomitable is on our sensors," the communications officer, Lyra, reported from her station. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of curiosity in her tone, as if she, too, felt the oddity. "Shall we initiate the scan?" "Not yet," Myler replied, his voice calm but firm. "Prepare the fleet, but hold off on the scan for a moment." A silence fell over the bridge as Myler considered the situation. Why would a warship of such apparent insignificance be on the outskirts of their territory? The humans were known for being brash, impulsive, and surprisingly resilient. But this didn't feel right. He ran his hands over the control panel, tweaking the data filters, and scrutinized the information again. Still, there was nothing. No glaring anomalies, no high-energy signatures, nothing to suggest any cause for concern. Maybe it's nothing, Myler thought, trying to shake off his gut feeling. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. But I will not underestimate these creatures. A hum of anticipation rippled through the fleet as the command to initiate the scan was given. The Iritians were about to delve into the Indomitable's systems to see what secrets it held. But as Myler gave the order, something strange happened. The moment the Iritian scanners began to engage, the data stream distorted. A brief flicker of interference blurred their readings. It wasn't a malfunction. This was something deliberate. The scanner had encountered a barrier. Myler leaned forward, his pulse quickening slightly. His intuition was right. There was something off about this ship. "Full power to the scanning array," he ordered. "Do not let it slip through. I want a full scan now." But as they pushed further into the Indomitable's energy fields, the interference grew. Stronger, more persistent. It was as if the warship itself was resisting their attempts to pry into its inner workings. The alien fleet, renowned for their vast array of scanning technologies, was being thwarted by something they could not even identify. Myler clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing in determination. "Increase the scan intensity," he commanded again. "We will see through this, whatever it is." The tension in the air was palpable. The fleet held its breath, awaiting the first clear image of the Indomitable. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly anticipate, was that the Indomitable wasn't the only one watching them. And somewhere deep within the human warship, a flicker of awareness had just ignited. The humans knew they were being scanned. They were ready. The Iritian fleet was locked in a tense silence, each ship pulsing with energy as the scan intensified. Myler's eyes were fixed on the data screens, the lines of code flickering like ghosts in the dim light of the bridge. His fingers drummed impatiently on the armrest of his command chair, each flicker of interference gnawing at his resolve. The moment felt wrong, like a slow tightening of a noose, unseen but inevitable. For an Irishan, instinct was a tool as sharp as any weapon, and Myler's instincts screamed that something was about to happen. He'd faced battles in the past where everything felt perfectly calculated, until one misstep turned the tide. He had survived those moments by listening to the quiet voice in the back of his mind, urging caution when confidence screamed otherwise. This was one of those moments. "Commander, the energy surge is increasing." Lyra, the communications officer, spoke up, her voice tense. "It's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Myler's jaw tightened. The data was coming in, but it was fragmented, like a shattered mirror that refused to reflect reality. Something was distorting their view of the Indomitable. It wasn't just a failure of technology. It was as though the warship itself was resisting their very attempts to understand it. "It's like the ship is alive," Lyra added, her words almost a whisper. "Every time we think we've got it, it pulls away, shifts, changes." "Change the angle of the scan," Myler ordered, his voice hard. "Whatever it is, we will find it." The orders were transmitted, but nothing changed. If anything, the interference grew more intense, swirling like a black cloud over the scanners. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the distortion vanished, replaced by a single, clear reading. For a moment, the bridge was still. On the screen before them was a simple image. The Indomitable, its hull intact and undamaged, drifting in the emptiness of space. There were no signs of hidden weapons, no unexpected energy spikes. It looked like any other warship, a bland, predictable machine. But something about it felt wrong. The tension on the bridge thickened. No one spoke, but all eyes were glued to the screen. The ship appeared too ordinary, too silent, as if it were waiting for something. Myler frowned, leaning forward in his chair. "This doesn't add up," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His hands hovered over the console, his mind racing. What's the trap? And then it happened. A flash of energy, sharp, blinding, erupted from the Indomitable. It wasn't an explosion, but a ripple, like the sudden snap of a taut string. For a split second, the entire Irishan fleet was thrown off balance. Their sensors wavered, their shields fluctuated, and the fabric of space itself seemed to warp. The flicker of light receded as quickly as it had appeared, leaving nothing but the silence of space in its wake. But in that moment, every Irishan aboard every ship felt it. A chilling certainty that this was no ordinary ship. The Indomitable was waiting. Myler's heart rate quickened. His mind, so accustomed to calculations and patterns, had just encountered an anomaly it couldn't process. He had been right. The ship wasn't just ordinary. It was something far more dangerous. "Captain, we've lost power to several systems," reported Ivar, the tactical officer. His voice was strained. "I can't explain it. Our energy grids are fluctuating uncontrollably. It's like something's draining our power." Myler's eyes widened. This was no mere defensive mechanism. Whatever the Indomitable had done, it was working in ways that defied logic. His instincts were never wrong. But now, the question burned at the edge of his mind like a whispering shadow. What kind of ship were they truly facing? "Retreat," Myler said, his voice calm but firm. "Now." But as the fleet began to shift, attempting to retreat to safer distances, the sense of unease only deepened. Myler had ordered caution, but it was already too late. The Indomitable was no longer a simple warship. It was something far more dangerous than the Irishans had ever imagined. And it was ready. The Irishan fleet was on the move, their ships recalculating vectors and engaging evasive maneuvers in a desperate attempt to regain control. Yet, as the fleet adjusted its course, something even more unnerving happened. The Indomitable, that once unassuming human warship, began to move as well. But this wasn't the erratic, panicked motion of a cornered animal. It was calculated, purposeful. Myler's hand tightened around the armrest of his command chair, his mind working overtime. The data feed he'd been monitoring was coming in at a steady pace, but every single reading felt wrong. Their initial scan had been distorted, yes, but it hadn't explained what was happening now. The Indomitable wasn't acting like a ship in distress. It was waiting for them to make the next move. "Captain." Lyra's voice crackled through the air, her tone filled with urgency. "The Indomitable is accelerating. It's locking onto our fleet. And we're not seeing any defensive systems on the ship's hull. No weapons, no shields, nothing that we can identify." "Impossible," Myler muttered. "We've been scanning for minutes. A ship like that should have at least something visible. Nothing's adding up." His instincts were screaming again, but this time, the threat felt different. It was no longer just about technology. It was about something deeper. The humans had done something to set them up. Suddenly, a cold shiver ran down Myler's spine. The Indomitable isn't acting like it's out of control. It's leading us. The realization hit him with terrifying clarity. Every move the Indomitable made was calculated to force the Irishans into an impossible corner. The ship was like a predator, drawing them into a trap they hadn't even seen coming. And worse, Myler was realizing that the trap wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about mind games. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. "We've detected a strange energy signature. It's coming from inside the Indomitable. But it's not just an ordinary power source. It's fluctuating. Almost like it's playing with us." Myler interrupted, his voice icy. "I know." At that moment, the lights in the command center flickered. Just a brief, subtle stutter, but it was enough to snap everyone's focus to the sensors. Then the Indomitable made its move. A single pulse of energy shot out from the warship, streaking across space like a jagged bolt of lightning. The pulse didn't strike any ship directly. It passed through the fleet, its energy seeping into the very fabric of space itself. The result was instantaneous. Power grids across the Irishan fleet began to flicker, and suddenly, entire sectors of the ships went dark. Gravity fields warped. Communications were severed. Even the Irishans' most sophisticated combat algorithms were frozen mid-calculation. For a moment, the entire fleet was thrown into chaos. "Report," Myler barked, his voice rising above the panic. "What happened?" "We're blind, Captain," Ivar shouted from his station. "The pulse scrambled our navigation systems. I can't track the Indomitable. It's vanishing from our sensors." And that was when it clicked. The Indomitable wasn't using conventional weapons. It was attacking the very essence of Irishan technology. It wasn't just resisting their scans. It was rewriting the rules of engagement. "Recalculate," Myler ordered. "Get our systems back online. Now." But it was already too late. In the sudden, disorienting silence that followed the pulse, Myler could sense it. The cold, deliberate calmness of the human ship. The Indomitable had just demonstrated its power, its intelligence, in a way that was completely foreign to Irishans. Myler had assumed they were facing another reckless, stubborn species, armed with brute force. Instead, they were facing something far more dangerous, a species that didn't fight with weapons alone. They fought with the mind, with ingenuity, with strategy. And what was worse, the Indomitable was already one step ahead. "We're dealing with something far beyond our expectations," Myler said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "Prepare for the worst. This isn't just a battle. It's a test, and we're failing it." Before anyone could respond, the eerie hum of the Indomitable echoed through the void. The warship, now invisible to the Irishan sensors, had them exactly where it wanted them. Myler had always believed in the superiority of Irishan intelligence, but now he realized how dangerous it could be to underestimate a species that could think around every obstacle. The humans had known this was coming, and the real battle was just beginning. The Irishan fleet was in disarray. Their ships were crippled by the pulse, their sensors scrambled, and their weapons offline. Commander Myler stood at the center of the chaos, his hands gripping the console as he fought to regain control of the ship. His mind raced, trying to analyze the situation. Every instinct told him to retreat, to regroup, but the human warship, indomitable, remained a dark, elusive presence just outside their reach. It was still there, silent, watching. Myler's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Lyra, the communications officer, her words tense. "Captain, something's happening. We've detected." Her voice faltered, the uncertainty in it unmistakable. "It's a hologram." "What?" Myler asked, leaning closer to the console. "A hologram?" "Yes, Captain. The Indomitable just projected a full-scale image of itself." "A hologram?" Myler's mind struggled to process the information. A mere diversion, perhaps. But why now? And what was it trying to achieve? The image flickered to life on the main screen, a perfect replica of the Indomitable, but vastly different. The hull was scared, the edges chipped and worn, its weapon systems outdated, its engines sputtering weakly as though the ship were on its last legs. It looked like a warship from a bygone era, nothing more than a relic of a primitive, struggling species. The Arishans stared at the projection, confused. This wasn't the ship they had been chasing. This wasn't even close. The Arishan fleet had been preparing to fire on the Indomitable, ready to wipe it out before it could spring any more surprises. Now, faced with this deceptive image, Myler hesitated. "What is this?" he muttered, almost to himself. The Arishans were not unfamiliar with holographic projections. They had used similar tactics in the past, often for misdirection. But this felt different, more sophisticated, more deliberate. Lyra glanced nervously at her console, her fingers tapping frantically. "It's not just a static projection, Captain. It's active. I'm seeing some sort of data feeding into it. The hologram is pulling from our scans, mimicking our systems in real time." She paused, a flicker of realization dawning on her. "The ship is feeding us false information." "False information," Myler repeated, his voice cold. His mind was working fast, piecing together the strange sequence of events. The Indomitable isn't just hiding its true power. It's trying to make us miscalculate. It's using our own data against us. Suddenly, the hologram shimmered, shifting slightly, like a mirage in the distance. The false warship flickered in and out of focus, but something was wrong. The human ship wasn't just masking its appearance. It was predicting their next move. The more the Arishans scanned, the more they were pulled into the illusion. "This isn't just a distraction," Myler whispered under his breath. "It's a trap." A cold realization struck him. The Indomitable had known exactly how to manipulate their every move. The hologram was just a reflection of the mind games it had been playing. Each time they tried to analyze it, the ship adapted. The Arishans weren't being attacked, they were being outsmarted. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Myler barked. "Bring the fleet to full alert. We've underestimated them for too long." But before he could finish the order, the false Indomitable shifted again. This time, it didn't just appear damaged. It disappeared entirely, vanishing from the screen like smoke in the wind. The real Indomitable had been hiding its true form, its true systems, behind the projection. And now, it was moving. "Where is it?" Myler demanded, his voice sharp. Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, her face drained of color. I can't track it. It's gone. The real ship is cloaked, Captain. We've lost it completely." A low hum filled the room, the sound of something growing, building beneath the surface, the calm before the storm. The bridge fell into an eerie silence as the Arishans scrambled to restore their scans, but Myler already knew. He had been right. This wasn't a warship, it was a test. And the humans weren't just trying to win. They were trying to break the Arishan will, piece by piece. The ship had vanished. And now, the true battle would begin. Then suddenly, the hum escalated, sharp, piercing, like the roar of some unseen predator. The Indomitable had shown its teeth, and the Arishans were about to feel its bite. "Brace for impact," Myler shouted. But it was too late. The Indomitable had already made its next move, and the Arishans were too slow to stop it. The hum of energy that filled the bridge of the Arishan sovereign had grown deafening, vibrating through the hull like the warning of an impending storm. Myler's hands clenched the armrests of his command chair, his mind racing. The Indomitable had vanished, its holographic deception rendering the entire fleet blind to its true position. For a moment, all that remained was an oppressive silence, thick, suffocating. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. A sudden violent jolt reverberated through the Sovereign. The entire ship shuddered, as if something massive had struck it from all sides. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the bridge lights flickered erratically. Myler's eyes shot wide open, and for the briefest of moments, the room seemed to twist in his mind. "We're under attack." Ivar, the tactical officer, screamed, his voice cracking through the chaos. Myler's gaze snapped to the screen, but it revealed nothing. Only a grainy, distorted view of the surrounding space. No sign of the Indomitable. Nothing that could explain the strike. But the damage was real. Systems were failing across the fleet, their once pristine energy grids now overloaded and flickering like dying stars. "Report now," Myler barked. "Energy spikes, Captain." Lara shouted from the comm station. "The Indomitable. It's in our midst, but its signature is shifting. It's blurring, like it's both everywhere and nowhere at once." Myler's mind spun. He had seen many tricks in his time. Illusionary warfare, cloaking technologies, even light-bending fields. But nothing could explain this. "Activate our emergency shields. Full power," he ordered, his voice cutting through the panic. The shields flared to life, a radiant blue barrier enveloping the ship, but the feeling of vulnerability remained. Every moment they spent fumbling through their systems, trying to make sense of the Indomitable's unpredictable behavior, felt like another nail in their coffin. Then came another jolt, this time more violent than before. The ship's hull groaned in protest, bending under the unseen force. Myler's head slammed into the console, disorienting him for a second. A sharp pain shot through his skull, but there was no time to focus on that. The bridge was in chaos. His officers were struggling to regain control, their hands flying over the consoles, but nothing was working. "We've lost communication with the rest of the fleet," Lara shouted, her voice laced with panic. I can't reach them. It's like we're isolated." Myler's mind raced. Isolation. The word echoed in his head, spinning in his thoughts. The Indomitable, whatever it was not only attacking their systems, but also systematically isolating them from one another. The pulse earlier had disrupted their coordination, but now it seemed the ship was actively picking them apart, piece by piece. Then, just as the panic began to creep in, the bridge went completely dark. The hum of the ship's engines ceased, the flickering lights cutting off as if the ship itself had fallen into stasis. The eerie stillness that followed was suffocating. Myler's breath came in shallow gasps as he staggered to his feet. His mind screamed for answers. What is happening? How? Why haven't we seen it yet? But his words failed him. And then, from the shadows, a low, resonant voice pierced the quiet of the bridge. "Do you understand now, Captain?" Myler froze, his heart pounding. The voice was soft, chillingly calm, but it carried a weight of inevitability, as though the words had been spoken by something not quite human, not quite machine. The voice came again, closer now, reverberating through the bridge like it was echoing in his very mind. "You think you can scan us. You think you can understand us. But we are not here to be understood, Myler. We are here to test your limits, to show you what happens when you fail to adapt." The words settled over Myler like a cold blanket, freezing the blood in his veins. The Indomitable is not a ship, Captain. It is a challenge, a mirror, a reflection of your own arrogance. The voice paused, as if savoring the moment. And you have failed. Myler's mind raced as the voice faded into the dark. His legs shook beneath him, but he forced himself to stand tall, to face the challenge ahead. The Indomitable wasn't just outwitting them. It was revealing the very essence of their limitations. The ship had not been damaged by weapons or force. It had been crippled by the one thing Irishans feared most: their own pride. The humans were showing them how fragile their superiority truly was, how easily their intelligence could be undone by a species that had learned to think differently. Before Myler could make sense of the situation, the lights flickered back on, the hum of the ship returning. But something had changed. A new energy filled the air, heavy with the certainty of what was to come. The Indomitable wasn't just toying with them, it was forcing them into the ultimate test. And Myler knew, with a sinking heart, that this was just the beginning. The bridge of the Irishan Sovereign was a scene of frantic chaos. Officers scrambled to restore vital systems, but the weight of the invisible enemy pressing down on them seemed too much to overcome. Myler's mind raced, still reeling from the cryptic voice, and the brutal realization that the Indomitable was no mere ship. It was a weapon of the mind, a harbinger of a new kind of warfare, and it was playing with them, as if they were nothing more than prey. Myler stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the faint outline of the empty space surrounding them, a void that seemed to mock them. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of how exposed they were. The ship had been crippled by its own arrogance. The Indomitable had made them doubt everything they knew. It wasn't just a test. It was a declaration. "Captain, we've lost all contact with the other ships." Lyra's voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it carried an unmistakable edge of panic. "We're alone, completely isolated." Myler clenched his fists, suppressing the anger rising in his throat. He had faced battles before, battles that had tested his strategic genius, but this was different. They were being forced to witness their own collapse. Suddenly, the entire ship jolted again, this time harder than before, knocking Myler off balance. He gripped the edge of his console, his eyes darting to the tactical screen. The fleet was still in disarray, engines sputtering, shields failing, weapons systems offline. But in the midst of the chaos, there was one disturbing fact that no one could ignore. The Indomitable had reappeared. The warship was no longer cloaked. Its massive form hovered on the edge of their sensors, impossibly still. But Myler knew better now. This wasn't the quiet before the storm. It was the calm, the eerie silence of something far more dangerous than anything they'd encountered. The Indomitable had stopped playing games. It was watching them, waiting for them to make their next move. "We need to do something, Captain," Ivar, the tactical officer, called out. "We can't just sit here. We're sitting ducks." Myler turned slowly to face his officer. His jaw was tight, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts as he tried to piece together their next steps. His instinct screamed to retreat, to regroup, to get the fleet back in order. But something about the situation told him that wasn't an option. The Indomitable wasn't here to fight. They weren't dealing with an enemy they could simply overpower. They were dealing with a force that bent the very fabric of their understanding. A quiet beep interrupted his thoughts, and Lyra's voice broke through the tension. "Captain," she said softly, her hands hovering over her console, "I'm receiving a transmission, but it's not from the Indomitable. It's from inside the fleet." The words hit Myler like a punch to the gut. "Inside," he repeated. "From who?" Lyra's fingers hesitated above the console. She looked up, fear flashing in her eyes. "It's not a voice. It's more like thoughts, Captain. I can feel them, feel the presence." Myler's stomach twisted. He stepped forward, his mind racing. "Focus on the transmission. Get it on the main screen." The moment the transmission was active, the entire bridge went still. The screen blinked to life, displaying nothing but static, a shifting blur of dark lines. But then, slowly, shapes began to form in the haze. Shadows, figures, indistinct at first, but then more clearly, human figures, standing on the deck of what looked like a control room. Their faces were blurred, their features unreadable, but their eyes gleamed with an unsettling, cold confidence. And then, they spoke. The voice, like the one that had echoed through Myler's mind earlier, rippled through the silence, its tone deep and serene. "You still don't understand, do you, Myler?" The sound of the voice sent a shiver down Myler's spine, but it was the words that truly shook him. How had they gotten into his mind again? The figures on the screen shifted again, as if they were just beyond reach, the transmission flickering like a dying star. Their message continued, growing clearer with each passing second. This war was never meant to be fought with weapons. This is a test of survival. Your pride and arrogance were your weapons, and now they are your chains. The figures melted away, leaving only a black void where the transmission had been, the connection severed as abruptly as it had begun. The air was thick with the weight of those words. The Indomitable hadn't just attacked, they had broken them. The war was not about weapons, tactics, or force. It was about something deeper, something the Arishans were failing to grasp. Myler's mind was spinning. He could feel the walls closing in around him. This wasn't a fight for victory. It was a fight for survival. And now, the true enemy had revealed itself. The Indomitable wasn't just a ship. It was a test of everything they were. And they were failing. The bridge of the Arishan sovereign had become a war zone in its own right. Sparks flew from the control panels, consoles flickered like dying stars, and the entire command center pulsed with an eerie, suffocating silence. The voice, that cold, impossible voice, echoed in Myler's mind, chilling him to the bone. "Your pride and arrogance are your chains." The words rang in his head, relentless and unyielding. The Indomitable had made its move. It wasn't just attacking their ships, it was dismantling their very essence, their confidence, piece by piece. "Captain, what do we do?" Ivar's voice broke through the haze of confusion, but it was laced with desperation. "We're completely vulnerable. The fleet is falling apart." Myler's eyes flicked to the tactical display, but he already knew. The fleet, their pride, was shattered. They were alone in a sea of silence, cut off from any reinforcements, surrounded by the invisible enemy that was slowly dismantling their minds. The holographic figures, the shifting transmissions, each piece was a puzzle that had begun to unravel at a maddening pace. Myler's pulse quickened as the weight of it all settled over him. The Indomitable wasn't just an adversary. It was a force, a weapon of pure psychological warfare. And if they couldn't break the cycle, the Sovereign would be just another casualty. "We can't keep waiting," Myler muttered to himself. "We need to act now." He turned sharply to Lyra, his voice steady, but a storm of thoughts churned beneath the surface. "Can we get a reading on the Indomitable?" Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, her face a mask of concentration. We can't. Every time we try to focus our scans, the ship, it disappears, like it's always one step ahead. I can't even pinpoint where it's coming from anymore." Myler clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on the empty space outside the Sovereign. "It's taunting us. Every time we think we've gained the upper hand, it's 2 steps ahead." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and a chill crept through the room. The ship's engines stuttered, as if the heart of the Sovereign was slowing down. Then came the unmistakable sound, another pulse, another shockwave. This time, it wasn't just a disorienting jolt. The pulse was targeted, directed straight at their power core. "We've lost containment," Ivar shouted. The core's destabilizing. Myler's heart sank. The core was their lifeblood, their primary defense. If it went, they were finished. "Prepare for emergency shutdown," Myler barked, his voice cutting through the panic. "Lyra, reroute all available power to the shields. We need a miracle." But as the crew scrambled to execute his commands, A voice, cold and mocking, cut through the chaos. "Too late, Captain. The game is over." Myler's blood ran cold. The voice again. It wasn't just in their heads now. It was coming from the ship itself. "We don't have much time," Myler said, urgency rising in his voice. "If we don't find a way to regain control of the core." His words were cut short as the Indomitable materialized in front of them, as if summoned from the depths of the void. The warship was no longer cloaked, but its presence was more unsettling than ever. The ship was alive, as if its very structure was adapting to the situation, shifting and pulsing with an otherworldly energy. Then the Indomitable spoke, but this time, it wasn't just the voice. The words were accompanied by a deep, guttural hum, resonating in Myler's chest as if they were reaching into his very core. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't about survival. This is about choice. You can choose to adapt, to break free from the chains of your pride, or you can perish with it." The words were a challenge, a final, cruel offer. Myler's mind raced. This wasn't a fight for victory. It was a test of evolution, of adaptability. The Indomitable wasn't just testing their strength, it was testing their ability to change. And for the first time since the beginning of the engagement, Myler realized something that shook him to his core. They had been fighting the wrong battle. The Indomitable wasn't trying to destroy them. It was trying to force them to break, to tear apart everything they thought they knew. It was about their evolution, forcing them to evolve, to become something else, something better. "Choose, Captain." The voice echoed again, this time more insistent. "Evolve, or be left behind." Myler stood frozen, the weight of the decision settling over him. His next move could either save them, or destroy everything. But the clock was ticking, and he knew one thing for certain. The game wasn't over yet. They still had a chance, but only if they could outsmart the Indomitable, before it was too late. The words echoed in Myler's mind, repeating like a mantra. Evolve, or be left behind. They were not just a warning. They were an ultimatum, and the weight of it pressed down on him like a collapsing star. The Sovereign's bridge had descended into chaos. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the ship's hum had become a low, ominous growl. The walls of the command center were alive with tension, the crew scrambling, unsure of their next move. Myler, however, stood still, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his mind racing. The Indomitable loomed outside, its presence a constant weight, a reminder that they were not merely in a battle for survival. They were in a battle for their very future. The ship was alive, its very form shifting and adapting to every move the Arishans made. And the more they tried to fight back, the more it pulled them deeper into its twisted web. Myler's gaze locked onto the empty expanse outside the ship's window, his eyes narrowing. He had to make a decision. The voice, the mocking challenge of the Indomitable, still hummed in his head. He could feel the pressure building, the unmistakable pulse of the ship's destabilizing core, the weakening shields, and the knowledge that time was running out. But then, a thought hit him like a flash of lightning. What if the Indomitable wasn't invincible? What if it had been so focused on pushing them to evolve, to adapt, that it had underestimated one thing, the core of their humanity, their resilience, their ability to think beyond the confines of any enemy's expectations? Myler's mind snapped into focus. He turned sharply to Lyra, his voice low but resolute. "Lyra, reroute the remaining power from our auxiliary systems. We need to create an inverse pulse, something that will disrupt the Indomitable's own energy flow." Lyra's eyes widened in disbelief, but she didn't hesitate. Her hands flew over the console, working furiously to implement his plan. "Captain, this is insane," Ivar shouted. "It's a desperate move. We'll be sacrificing everything." Myler's jaw tightened as he met his officer's gaze. "We don't have a choice anymore. If we're going to break the Indomitable's grip on us, we need to strike when it's most vulnerable." The ship's energy levels flickered once more. The core's instability was growing. They had no more time. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, An undeniable truth. The Indomitable was playing a long game, but they were capable of outsmarting it. Now, Lyra. Now. Myler barked. With a final series of keystrokes, the ship's auxiliary power reserves surged into action, redirecting all available energy into a single concentrated pulse, an energy wave designed to reverse the flow of the Indomitable's own systems. The room was filled with the eerie sound of charging power, the air vibrating with an unseen force. For a moment, it seemed like nothing was happening. The Sovereign hung in the void, its energy reserves draining dangerously low, waiting for the Indomitable to retaliate. But then, just as Myler feared they had failed, the Indomitable flickered. For the first time since the battle began, the massive warship's presence wavered. The shudder of its energy fields was palpable. A crackling distortion rippled through its form, as if it was fighting to maintain its grip on the battlefield. The ship's adaptive camouflage faltered, and for a split second, the Indomitable was exposed, vulnerable. The crew of the Sovereign held their breath as the inverse pulse collided with the Indomitable's core systems. The ship's structure groaned, and the distortion deepened. It was as if the Indomitable was losing its ability to control its form, its shape, its very existence. The voice returned, quieter this time, tinged with something that resembled frustration. You think this will stop me? You think you can undo everything I've done? Myler's eyes narrowed, the edge of a smile forming on his lips. No, we're not trying to stop you. We're trying to adapt. The crew watched in stunned silence as the Indomitable began to break apart at the seams, its form shifting uncontrollably. The control it had held over the battlefield, over their minds, began to dissipate. The ship was no longer invincible. Its carefully crafted illusions were falling away, and for the first time, Myler could see it, the heart of the Indomitable, a network of ever-shifting energy, raw and untamed. The Sovereign's engines roared to life, the ship's systems coming back online with newfound power. The Indomitable was no longer an unstoppable force. It was a broken reflection of what it had once been. Myler's pulse quickened, the realization hitting him with full force. They had done it. Against all odds, they had outsmarted the Indomitable. But in that moment, as the warship crumbled before them, one question remained, hanging in the air. Had they truly won, or had they simply been given another chance to prove that they had evolved? The answer, like the future, remained uncertain. But one thing was clear. The Irishans had adapted, and they were not the same as they had been before.